Who died this week, January 2026 number 4 celebrity deaths, and more. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is having a nice day. Before we begin the video, please subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. Here's your big news, comprehensive, emotional, full-length tribute article on the major deaths and cultural losses reported this week across the world, January 2026. This is focused on confirmed, factual passings, not social media hoaxes or rumors, so fans and readers can reflect with respect and context. In a world that moves quickly and often feels overwhelmed with news cycles, it's important to pause and acknowledge those whose lives touched millions, whether through art, entertainment, culture, conversation, or inspiration. This past week in January has seen the world bid farewell to figures from royalty, podcasting, cinema, and viral internet fame. Each passing carries its own story and legacy, and together they remind us of how fleeting life can be and how deeply people from all walks of life can affect others. This week's confirmed deaths range from a beloved European royal whose life was steeped in history and humanitarian work to a soulful voice in mental health storytelling whose vulnerability became a source of strength for many. In between, a charismatic actor whose decades of screen presence brought joy and recognition, and a larger-than-life internet personality whose cautionary tale became a cautionary call to health. Each represents a piece of culture that will be missed. Princess Irene of Greece and Denmark, Royal Legacy and Cultural Bridge. Princess Irene of Greece, aged 83, passed away peacefully in Madrid earlier this week, surrounded by loved ones. A figure known for her grace, musical passion, and devotion to philanthropy, Irene's life spanned an era of major global change. She was the sister of Queen Sofia of Spain, and her family's legacy stretches across European history. Beyond her royal duties, Irene was a devoted concert pianist and the founder of Music and Harmony, an NGO dedicated to arts, education, and cultural exchange. Her contributions extended beyond titles, rooted in a belief that music and human connection could build bridges across communities. Her death was announced by the Greek and Spanish royal family, and tributes began pouring in from leaders, cultural figures, and fans alike who knew her as both a princess and a passionate advocate for artistic outreach. Geordie Glasner, a voice for healing, gone too soon. At just 34 years old, podcaster and therapist Geordie Glasner passed away peacefully at home on January 13th after courageously sharing her journey with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer, with her audience. Glasner co-hosted the hugely impactful podcast Grief Street, where she and her co-host tackled topics of loss, healing, identity, and emotional truth. What set Geordie apart was her willingness to be vulnerable in public, transforming her own struggle into a platform that gave others permission to confront grief without shame. Fans have described her as an inspiration and a genuine healer in a world afraid of pain, and social media has been filled with heartfelt tributes and personal stories from listeners who say Grief Street helped them navigate their darkest moments. Beyond the podcast, Glasner's work touched countless people through therapy, mentorship, and grassroots community events. Her legacy will live on in the conversations she helped start and the comfort she brought to so many. Arlindo de Souza, the Brazilian Popeye, a cautionary figure in fitness culture. In Recife, Brazil, Arlindo de Souza, better known worldwide as the Brazilian Popeye, died at age 55 after health complications attributed to extreme bodybuilding practices, including the use of oil injections to achieve unnatural muscle size. Though he garnered internet fame and global attention for his extraordinary appearance, de Souza became a controversial figure, both for the risks he took with his body and for the warnings he later shared about the dangers of performance-enhancing shortcuts. His death resonates deeply within global fitness and bodybuilding communities, many of whom saw his story as both fascinating and a stark reminder of how far the pursuit of fame and aesthetics can stretch human health. Conversations sparked by his passing are centered around athlete safety, self-image, and the responsibility of social platforms in amplifying extreme influencers. T.K. Carter, beloved screen actor and television icon. Actor T.K. Carter passed away at age 69, leaving behind a career that spanned nearly 5 decades of film and television. Known affectionately for his role as Knowles in John Carpenter's sci-fi horror classic The Thing, and warmly remembered for his performances as Mike Fulton in the 80s sitcom Punky Brewster, Carter was an adaptable performer who brought depth and soul to every part he played. From guest appearances on beloved sitcoms like Family Matters and A Different World, to starring roles that endeared him to audiences of multiple generations, Carter's legacy is one of versatility and humanity. Tributes from fans and fellow actors alike describe him as funny, genuine, and unforgettable, someone whose presence both on and off-screen embodied warmth and relatability. His body of work continues to be celebrated by actors, film lovers, and TV audiences around the world. Beyond the headlines, other notable losses in early January. While some figures pass with international headlines, others leave quieter yet deeply meaningful impacts that ripple through their fields and communities. In early January, several other names were confirmed as losses as the new year began, from beloved character actors and creative forces to innovators and long-lived cultural contributors whose work set benchmarks in fashion, comedy, music composition, and visual media. Scott Adams, creator of the Dilbert comic strip, died at age 68. His satire on office culture and societal absurdities touched millions of readers over decades, becoming a defining voice in modern comics and cultural commentary. Composer Guy Moon, known for iconic animated series scores, passed away, leaving behind melodies familiar to generations. In television and entertainment, the early days of January also marked the passing of respected creatives, including directors, sound engineers, and multi-genre contributors whose names may not be household headlines, but whose artistry shaped the media we consume. Other less widely covered but important figures around the world, from sports icons to cultural educators, also died in January, reminding us that loss touches all corners of human endeavor and achievement. Reflection on a week of loss. This week's passings serve as a reminder that impact is not measured merely by fame, but by the connections people forge through their work, voices, and presence. Royals who championed cultural unity, creative voices that shaped laughter and empathy, risk-taking personalities who ignited global conversations, and entertainers who became part of family memories. Each story matters. They remind us that while life is finite, influence endures through stories, art, memory, and the communities that carry them forward. For readers mourning these losses, it helps to recognize that a life lived fully, whether through global platforms or intimate circles, leaves behind a legacy worth honoring. These deaths are a moment to reflect on how individuals shape the cultural landscape, touch hearts, and unify us through shared experience, art, humanity, and emotion. Through remembering them, we sustain their contributions and acknowledge the fragile, beautiful journey of life. The week's losses do not end with headlines or obituaries. What follows in the days after these deaths is often just as powerful as the announcements themselves. Tributes ripple outward, fan communities gather, and legacies are re-examined through the lens of grief. January 2026 has opened with a sobering reminder that the people who shape culture, comfort audiences, and inspire conversation are never just names on a screen. They are threads in a shared human story, and when they are gone, the absence is felt in unexpected ways. Across social media and fan forums, the reactions this week have been deeply emotional and strikingly personal. Listeners of Geordie Glassner's work shared screenshots of podcast timestamps that helped them survive sleepless nights and devastating losses. Viewers revisited episodes of Punky Brewster and clips from The Thing, remembering where they were the first time they saw TK Carter on screen and how his performances quietly became part of their childhoods. Royal watchers reflected on Princess Irene's quiet dignity and the way she represented a softer, more artistic side of European royalty, one not driven by spectacle but by service and culture. These reactions highlight an essential truth. Public figures often become emotional companions to people they never meet. A podcaster's voice can feel like a trusted friend. An actor's character can feel like family. A royal figure can symbolize continuity and grace during times of global uncertainty. When those figures pass, the grief may surprise even the people experiencing it, because it is tied to moments, memories, and emotional milestones rather than direct personal connection. The deaths this week have also reignited conversations about health, vulnerability, and the cost of visibility. Geordie Glasner's openness about terminal illness challenged long-standing taboos around discussing death while still living. Her willingness to document fear, acceptance, anger, and hope created space for others to confront their own grief honestly. In contrast, the death of Arlindo de Souza has fueled renewed debate around body image culture, internet fame, and the dangerous extremes people sometimes reach in pursuit of recognition. His story remains a sobering reminder that viral attention often comes with real-world consequences that outlast the spotlight. In the entertainment world, the loss of veteran performers continues to raise questions about how we preserve artistic legacies. T.K. Carter's career spanned decades, genres, and generations, yet many younger viewers are only now discovering the breadth of his work. His passing has prompted renewed interest in classic television and film, reminding audiences that cultural history is not static. It is rediscovered and reinterpreted with every generation that looks back. January's growing list of losses also underscores how quickly the news cycle moves on, even as grief lingers. One day a death dominates headlines, and the next it is replaced by something new. Yet for families, collaborators, and devoted fans, mourning does not operate on a schedule. The emotional weight carries on quietly, long after public attention shifts elsewhere. That disconnect is one of the most challenging aspects of public loss, and one that many fans articulate during weeks like this. There is also a broader sense of reflection that emerges when losses cluster together at the start of a new year. January is traditionally associated with fresh starts, resolutions, and optimism. When death intrudes so prominently, it forces a confrontation with impermanence. Many readers and viewers respond by reevaluating priorities, reconnecting with loved ones, or revisiting creative works that once brought comfort. In this way, loss can paradoxically deepen appreciation for life. Behind the scenes, institutions and communities tied to these figures are already considering how to honor them. Foundations continue their work. Podcasts remain available, their episodes preserved as living conversations. Films and television series find new audiences through streaming and retrospectives. These acts of remembrance ensure that influence does not vanish with death. Instead, it evolves. As January 2026 continues, more losses will inevitably follow, as they always do. But this week stands out for the diversity of its impact, spanning royalty, mental health advocacy, fitness culture, and classic entertainment. Together, these deaths illustrate how many different ways a life can matter and how legacy is not defined solely by fame, but by resonance. Remembering those who died this week is not only about mourning. It is about acknowledging the ways they shaped conversations, sparked joy, offered comfort, or provoked reflection. Their absence leaves space, but their work fills it with memory. As the year unfolds, those memories remain, quietly influencing culture, creativity, and the countless lives they touched. This week may be marked by loss, but it is also marked by gratitude. Gratitude for art that endured, voices that spoke honestly, and lives that, in their own unique ways, left the world changed. As the week closes, the sense of collective mourning begins to settle into something quieter, but no less powerful. The initial shock fades, replaced by reflection, remembrance, and the slow realization that these losses have subtly reshaped the cultural landscape. January 2026 is still young, yet it already carries the weight of goodbye, reminding the world that influence does not require longevity, and longevity does not guarantee immunity from loss. In homes, classrooms, gyms, and creative spaces, the echoes of these lives continue. Teachers reference Princess Irene's dedication to music and cultural diplomacy as an example of leadership beyond politics. Mental health professionals point clients toward Geordie Glasner's words as a source of comfort, proof that honesty about pain can coexist with hope. Fitness communities pause to reassess the messages they promote, sparked by the cautionary legacy left behind by Arlindo de Souza. Film lovers revisit performances they once took for granted, now seeing them through the lens of appreciation rather than familiarity. What binds these stories together is not celebrity, but humanity. Each person who died this week lived in the public eye to varying degrees, yet their most lasting contributions often came from moments of vulnerability, dedication, or quiet consistency. Princess Irene was not known for scandal or spectacle, but for steadiness and cultural commitment. Geordie Glassner did not chase fame, yet her authenticity built a deeply loyal audience. TK Carter rarely dominated headlines, but his performances became part of everyday life for millions. Even Arlindo de Souza, whose fame was rooted in extremes, ultimately left behind a message about consequence and self-awareness. There is also an unspoken shift that happens when familiar names disappear. The world feels subtly rearranged. Favorite voices are no longer adding to the conversation. Familiar faces will never appear in new roles. These absences are not always loud, but they are permanent. Over time, they change how audiences engage with media, history, and memory. In the days following such losses, there is often a renewed interest in preservation. Archival clips trend. Podcasts are replayed. Old interviews resurface. People search for meaning in the words and work left behind, hoping to find guidance or closure. This process of revisiting is itself a form of tribute. It keeps legacies active rather than frozen in time. January's fourth week of losses also highlights the generational nature of grief. Younger audiences mourn voices that guided them through modern challenges like mental health and online identity. Older viewers feel the sting of losing figures tied to formative years of television and film. Royal observers reflect on an era slowly fading into history. Each generation experiences the same losses differently, yet all are connected by shared remembrance. As the calendar turns toward the end of the month, attention will inevitably shift to what comes next. New stories will dominate headlines. New controversies will emerge. But for those who pause, this week stands as a reminder that progress and loss move side by side. Every cultural step forward is built on the work of those who came before. Remembering who died this week is not an exercise in sadness alone. It is an acknowledgement of continuity. Lives end, but influence does not disappear. It disperses, carried forward by those who listened, watched, learned, and were changed. January 2026 has already asked the world to slow down and remember. In doing so, it has reaffirmed something timeless, that even in loss, connection endures. As this week becomes part of history, the names remembered here will continue to surface in conversations, classrooms, playlists, and personal reflections. That is how legacy survives. Not through headlines, but through the quiet persistence of memory. As the conversation around this week's losses continues, a deeper pattern begins to emerge, one that goes beyond individual lives and speaks to how society processes grief in real time. In an era of instant updates and constant scrolling, death arrives alongside trending topics, notifications, and breaking alerts. Yet despite the speed of modern life, the emotional response remains profoundly human. People still stop, reflect, and feel the weight of absence. January 2020's fourth week has become one of those moments where time briefly slows. There is something uniquely sobering about encountering multiple deaths within the same span of days. It forces a collective pause, a reckoning with how fragile even the most visible lives can be. Royal titles, creative influence, physical strength, or cultural recognition offer no shield. This realization resonates deeply, particularly at the beginning of a new year when many are already reevaluating priorities and intentions. Loss, arriving so early in the calendar, sharpens that introspection. For many fans, grief this week has taken the form of gratitude. Instead of focusing solely on endings, people are celebrating the work that remains. Playlists are reshuffled to include familiar voices. Old episodes are rewatched not out of nostalgia alone, but as acts of appreciation. Podcast episodes once consumed casually are now listened to with renewed attention, knowing there will be no new ones to follow. This shift transforms everyday media into keepsakes. There is also a renewed awareness of storytelling itself. Geordie Glassner's willingness to document her experience with illness has inspired renewed discussions about honesty in media and the importance of allowing space for vulnerability. Her legacy has become a reference point for how storytelling can heal rather than distract. That impact continues to ripple outward, influencing how creators and audiences engage with difficult subjects. Similarly, the reaction to the passing of veteran entertainers has highlighted a growing respect for careers built on consistency rather than spectacle. T.K. Carter's body of work is now being revisited as an example of quiet excellence, reminding audiences that not every legacy is loud. Sometimes it is steady, familiar, and deeply woven into the fabric of everyday entertainment. Even stories rooted in controversy, like that of Arlindo de Souza, have sparked reflection rather than dismissal. Conversations have shifted toward responsibility, health, and the pressures of visibility in the digital age. In death, his story has taken on a new dimension, one that encourages caution and compassion rather than judgment. As the week fades into memory, these losses collectively underline a truth that feels especially poignant now. Culture is not built only by stars at their peak, but by individuals whose work intersects with ordinary lives in meaningful ways. When they are gone, it is not just their absence that is felt, but the silence where their contributions once lived. January 2026 continues forward, carrying both momentum and mourning. The names remembered this week will gradually recede from headlines, but they will not vanish from consciousness. They will remain present in reruns, recordings, archived interviews, and in the personal stories of those they touched. In the end, weeks like this remind us that remembrance itself is an act of connection. By pausing to acknowledge who died, how they lived, and what they left behind, the world briefly unites in something rare and powerful. Shared memory, shared gratitude, and shared understanding that every life, public or private, leaves a mark worth honoring. As the final days of the week settle in, the weight of these losses begins to transform into something quieter and more contemplative. The headlines fade, but the emotional residue remains, lingering in subtle ways. A familiar voice missing from a playlist. A favorite episode replayed with new awareness. A quote shared again, this time carrying the weight of finality. This is often how grief truly lives, not in grand gestures, but in the small moments that follow. For many, this week has also sparked conversations about time and legacy. The contrast between lives cut short and lives that span decades invites reflection on how impact is measured. Geordie Glassner's 34 years carried a depth of influence that far exceeded her time, while Princess Irene's 83 years reflected steady devotion to culture and service. Together, they reinforce the idea that meaning is not defined by duration, but by connection. There is also a growing sense of responsibility among audiences and creators alike. Listeners speak about being more intentional with the content they consume, valuing voices that offer honesty over noise. Viewers express renewed respect for actors who built careers without chasing constant attention. Communities shaped by fitness, wellness, or aesthetics confront uncomfortable questions about where admiration crosses into harm. These conversations are part of the legacy left behind, shaping choices long after the individuals themselves are gone. As January moves forward, this week will likely be remembered as a moment of collective pause. A reminder that culture is built by people, not algorithms, and that every contribution carries a human story behind it. The losses of this week did not occur in isolation. They intersected with millions of lives, each in different ways, creating a shared experience of remembrance across borders and backgrounds. In remembering who died this week, there is also an invitation to honor the living, to speak openly while voices are still here, to preserve stories before they become archives, to appreciate creativity, compassion, and courage in real time rather than retrospectively. Loss has a way of sharpening that awareness, turning reflection into resolve. This chapter of January 2026 closes not with finality, but with continuity. The people remembered this week live on through their work, their words, and the changes they inspired. Their absence is real, but so is their influence. And in that balance between grief and gratitude, the world moves forward, carrying their stories into whatever comes next. As the reflections on this week's losses continue, there is a broader cultural conversation emerging about remembrance, responsibility, and the human desire to honor life through memory. Beyond the immediate sadness, these deaths prompt questions about how society engages with legacy. What we choose to celebrate, what we choose to archive, and how we transmit lessons from one generation to the next all come into focus when people who shaped public consciousness are gone. For younger audiences, the lives of figures like Geordie Glassner and Arlindo de Souza offer teachable moments. Glassner's candidness about illness underscores the power of vulnerability and transparency, reminding listeners that sharing struggles can foster community, empathy, and healing. Arlindo de Souza's story is a cautionary tale about extremes and the consequences of fame pursued without caution. Together, they illustrate that public visibility carries both influence and responsibility, and that even as admirers, audiences must approach idols thoughtfully. For longtime fans of entertainment and culture, the passing of T.K. Carter and Princess Irene of Greece evokes a different kind of reflection, one about continuity, nostalgia, and intergenerational memory. Carter's decades of performances connect multiple generations through film and television, demonstrating how a single performer can quietly anchor cultural moments. Princess Irene's life reminds the public that influence often operates in subtle ways, through philanthropy, cultural work, and diplomacy, leaving marks that are not always immediately visible, but no less significant. In this sense, January 2026 is revealing the multifaceted ways lives intersect with society. Deaths are not merely endings. They are prompts for storytelling, analysis, and renewed attention to values. Fans and observers sift through archives, revisit media, and share memories online, creating collective narratives that extend the impact of those who have passed. These narratives form bridges between past, present, and future audiences, ensuring that influence is cumulative rather than fleeting. Moreover, the week highlights the emotional dimensions of fame and public life. Public figures are mourned not only for what they accomplished, but for how they made audiences feel. Whether it was the comfort of a voice, the inspiration of artistic output, or the cautionary example of life choices, the imprint left behind becomes part of collective consciousness. Social media amplifies this effect, offering forums for grief, storytelling, and personal reflection, transforming individual loss into shared experience. Looking ahead, the deaths of this week are likely to have lasting ramifications across multiple spheres. In the entertainment industry, there may be renewed interest in preserving film, television, and podcasting archives, ensuring that cultural history remains accessible. In public discourse, health and wellness conversations may shift in response to stories like that of Arlindo de Souza. In civic and philanthropic communities, Princess Irene's contributions may inspire projects that honor her commitment to arts and international understanding. Ultimately, the significance of this week's losses lies not only in absence, but in influence. Each individual left behind lessons, models, and legacies that will inform decisions, spark conversations, and inspire new generations. January 2026 will be remembered not just as a week of endings, but as a period in which reflection, awareness, and the acknowledgement of human fragility were brought to the forefront. In celebrating and remembering, society continues a dialogue with the past, carrying forward the essence of those who are gone. As the week winds down and the immediate headlines fade, the impact of these losses continues to ripple through both private and public spaces. For families, friends, and colleagues, grief is personal and ongoing. For fans and observers, mourning often takes the form of ritualized remembrance, revisiting favorite works, sharing anecdotes online, and engaging in conversations that honor the deceased's life and contributions. This dual experience underscores a truth about celebrity and cultural influence. The work of public figures is never just about performance. It shapes emotional landscapes, community conversations, and even personal identities. In the days following their passings, communities have found unique ways to memorialize those who died. Listeners of Geordie Glassner's Grief Street have organized virtual vigils and discussion panels to continue conversations about grief, mental health, and vulnerability. Fans of T.K. Carter have hosted online marathons of his most memorable performances, analyzing his roles and celebrating the subtle humor, depth, and humanity he brought to screen. Social media threads dedicated to Princess Irene have become spaces where admirers share archival photos, recordings of her performances, and reflections on her cultural and humanitarian work, reinforcing the continuing relevance of her contributions. Arlindo de Souza's story, though tragic, has spurred educational initiatives and renewed awareness about the dangers of extreme body modification and unsafe fitness practices. Gyms, online fitness communities, and health influencers have begun conversations about safe practices, realistic expectations, and the mental health challenges associated with body image pressures, using his passing as a cautionary tale to prevent similar tragedies in the future. This week's confluence of deaths also illuminates how societies collectively process grief in a digital age. Unlike previous generations, today's audiences can respond instantaneously, tweeting, posting, and sharing stories in real time. Memes, fan tributes, and commentary create layered dialogues that blend humor, remembrance, and reflection, making public mourning both performative and deeply personal. While some may criticize this as fleeting or superficial, for many, it is a genuine form of engagement, a way to negotiate loss in a culture saturated with constant information. Perhaps most profoundly, the losses this week invite reflection on mortality, legacy, and the fragility of human influence. Princess Irene's decades of service highlight the long-term impact of dedication and discretion. Geordie Glassner's brief but potent life demonstrates the transformative power of openness and vulnerability. T.K. Carter's extensive career reminds us that consistency, subtlety, and commitment to craft can touch countless lives. Arlindo de Souza's story emphasizes the real-world consequences of unchecked ambition and public fascination with extremes. Together, these narratives form a mosaic of human experience, reminding audiences that every life, no matter how public or private, leaves traces that endure. As January 2026 continues, the week's losses will gradually integrate into broader cultural memory. Documentaries, retrospectives, and scholarly analysis may revisit these figures, ensuring that their work, influence, and lessons remain accessible to future generations. Meanwhile, individuals will continue to honor them in private ways, listening, watching, learning, and sharing stories that keep their essence alive. Ultimately, this week serves as a stark but vital reminder. Life is fleeting, influence is enduring, and remembrance is an active, ongoing process. Through reflection, conversation, and engagement, the legacies of those who passed this week continue to shape culture, inspire action, and connect communities across time and space. Even in absence, their voices, visions, and stories remain, echoing quietly in the hearts of all who experience them. As the reflection on this week's notable deaths deepens, there is a subtle but undeniable shift in how audiences engage with media, culture, and personal memory. The passing of public figures such as Princess Irene of Greece, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza has sparked not only mourning but also broader conversations about the nature of influence, the fragility of life, and the ways in which stories outlive their creators. In this sense, grief becomes a lens through which society evaluates the meaning of legacy, creativity, and the bonds that tie people together, even across oceans and generations. In homes, classrooms, and online communities, these conversations have taken on multiple forms. For younger audiences, Geordie Glassner's work on Grief Street illustrates the importance of honesty and vulnerability in a world that often favors perfection or performative happiness. Her life encourages open dialogue about mental health and terminal illness, teaching that sharing personal struggles can create community and empower others. In fitness and wellness circles, the story of Arlindo de Souza is being used as a cautionary tale, an urgent reminder that extremes in pursuit of admiration or fame carry real-world consequences, often invisible until tragedy occurs. Meanwhile, entertainment and cultural observers have taken this week as an opportunity to revisit the works of T.K. Carter, celebrating the depth and warmth he brought to television and film. From classic sitcoms to cult favorite films, his performances now carry the additional weight of memory, reminding audiences how subtly and profoundly an actor can shape cultural touchstones. Princess Irene's death similarly prompts reflection on less visible forms of influence. Through philanthropy, music, and diplomacy, she demonstrated that leadership and legacy are often measured not by headlines, but by quiet acts of service that ripple across communities and generations. The week also illustrates how modern grief has evolved in the digital age. Social media allows fans to share personal recollections, engage in collective storytelling, and participate in rituals of remembrance in real time. Virtual vigils, comment threads, and archival video tributes transform mourning into active engagement, enabling audiences to honor lives in ways that were impossible before. These platforms create a shared memory space, a public ledger of influence, where emotions, gratitude, and reflection intertwine. Perhaps most importantly, this week's losses invite an inward look at mortality, purpose, and the fleeting nature of opportunity. Each life, whether brief or long-lived, celebrated or niche, offers lessons about resilience, authenticity, and impact. They remind us that influence is not determined solely by fame or duration, but by the connections made, the conversations sparked, and the emotions elicited in those who encounter that life. As January 2026 continues, the legacy of these individuals will endure through storytelling, reflection, and cultural preservation. Audiences will continue to replay performances, revisit podcasts, share stories, and examine the choices that shaped each figure's path. Their contributions, diverse in scope and impact, serve as a reminder that memory is living, influence is ongoing, and the reverberations of a single life can continue to inspire, caution, and educate long after the final goodbye. Through this ongoing engagement, the week's losses are transformed from mere absence into enduring presence. Their stories live on in dialogue, scholarship, fan devotion, and everyday reflection, ensuring that influence and legacy are never fully extinguished, even as the world continues to move forward. As the echoes of this week's losses continue to resonate, there emerges a broader understanding of how society interacts with legacy and influence. Beyond headlines and social media tributes, the deaths of Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza offer lessons about continuity, memory, and the ways personal impact extends far beyond the immediate circle of family and friends. They remind us that every life, whether lived in public view or through quieter contributions, leaves traces that shape cultural, emotional, and social landscapes. One of the most striking aspects of this week is the variety of spheres affected. Royalty, entertainment, digital media, and fitness culture. Each domain experienced loss, yet the responses reveal common human threads: reflection, storytelling, and remembrance. Fans of Geordie Glassner, for instance, have turned grief into advocacy, discussing terminal illness, mental health, and community support. Admirers of T.K. Carter revisit decades of performance, examining the nuance, humor, and humanity he brought to each role. Followers of Arlindo de Souza engage in critical conversations about body image, health, and the pressures of viral fame. Meanwhile, those inspired by Princess Irene's life celebrate her dedication to cultural diplomacy and the arts, highlighting how subtle influence can endure through decades. The week also underscores the evolving nature of public mourning. In an age of instant communication and online archives, grief is no longer confined to personal spaces. Fans, scholars, and casual observers can collectively process loss, share stories, and preserve memory in real time. Virtual vigils, social media campaigns, and tribute videos have become modern rituals that help transform raw emotion into enduring remembrance. These platforms allow legacies to be reflected upon, critiqued, celebrated, and internalized across generations and geographies. At the same time, these deaths provoke introspection. They invite audiences to examine their own priorities, to consider how influence is measured, and to acknowledge the fragility of life in an era of constant visibility. They serve as a reminder that influence is not confined to fame or longevity, but manifests through moments of connection, acts of creativity, and the courage to be vulnerable. The lives lost this week embody those principles, providing both cautionary lessons and inspiring examples. As the calendar progresses, the cultural, emotional, and intellectual impacts of these losses will continue to unfold. Audiences will revisit performances, podcasts, interviews, and historical records. They will incorporate lessons from these lives into personal decisions, professional pursuits, and creative endeavors. In this way, the departed remain present through memory, inspiration, and ongoing discourse. Ultimately, this week demonstrates that death, while finite, does not erase influence. The stories of Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza live on, reminding society of the enduring power of art, vulnerability, courage, and dedication. Their absence is tangible, but their presence, through the memories, lessons, and emotions they leave behind, continues to shape the world, bridging past, present, and future. As the days progress and the immediate shock of this week's losses begins to settle, there emerges a deeper awareness of how absence reshapes cultural and personal landscapes. The passing of Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza is not only about the cessation of life, it is about the void left in the spaces they once inhabited, the conversations they inspired, and the emotions they stirred. Their deaths encourage reflection on how influence is measured, reminding society that visibility alone does not define legacy. The resonance of actions, words, and creativity does. In homes, workplaces, and digital spaces, audiences are finding ways to honor these lives. Families of the deceased have begun private commemorations, while fans have turned to collective remembrance online. Discussions about Princess Irene's role in European cultural diplomacy reveal the lasting impact of subtle, patient leadership. Musicians, educators, and cultural historians revisit her philanthropic work, acknowledging how arts and education can create enduring bridges between communities. Geordie Glassner's openness about illness and grief has sparked virtual conversations about vulnerability, mental health, and the human capacity for empathy. Her listeners continue to draw comfort from her recordings, using her experiences as both guide and companion through their own trials. The entertainment world is similarly processing the loss of T.K. Carter. Longtime fans and new audiences alike are revisiting his body of work, analyzing the depth he brought to roles that balanced humor, pathos, and authenticity. Every performance, from cult classics to mainstream television, is now seen in the context of mortality and legacy, reminding viewers of the subtle ways a performer can influence culture and personal memory. Meanwhile, the cautionary story of Arlindo de Souza continues to spark discussion in fitness, social media, and wellness communities. His life underscores the delicate balance between aspiration and health, fame and consequence, leaving audiences to grapple with the real-world implications of extreme choices in pursuit of admiration. This week also highlights the role of memory as an active, living process. Audiences do not simply mourn. They engage with archives, share stories, and preserve moments. Podcasts, interviews, performances, and social media threads serve as repositories of cultural and emotional significance. Each replay, each discussion, is a reaffirmation of the enduring presence of those who have passed. In this way, death does not signify a complete end but rather transforms influence into a form that persists through memory, reflection, and storytelling. Additionally, the week prompts reflection on mortality and the transient nature of public and personal life. Audiences are reminded that time is limited, that influence is fragile, and that the opportunity to engage meaningfully with others, whether through art, advocacy, or personal connection, is finite. Princess Irene's decades-long dedication to culture, Geordie Glassner's brief yet impactful career, T.K. Carter's enduring performances, and Arlindo de Souza's viral notoriety each illustrate different dimensions of human presence and its consequences. Collectively, They teach that the true measure of a life is not only in years lived, but in the depth of impact and the connections forged. As January 2026 continues, the ripple effects of these deaths will extend beyond immediate grief. Audiences, scholars, and fans will continue to revisit performances, podcasts, historical accounts, and personal stories. Tributes and reflections will maintain a living dialogue about the lessons, inspiration, and cautions embedded in these lives. Legacy, in this sense, becomes a dynamic, ongoing interaction between the departed and those who remember, ensuring that influence endures across generations, media, and communities. Ultimately, this week stands as a testament to the power of memory, the fragility of life, and the enduring force of influence. While Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza are no longer present physically, their presence continues in the narratives, reflections, and inspirations they have left behind. In honoring their stories, society participates in a collective act of remembrance that bridges past, present, and future, affirming that life's impact is measured not by its brevity, but by the depth and reach of its resonance. As the reflections deepen, the impact of these losses begins to be felt not only in immediate mourning but in broader societal and cultural consciousness. The passing of Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza is a stark reminder that public figures, whether in royalty, entertainment, digital media, or fitness, serve as touchstones in our collective memory. They shape perceptions, inspire action, and provide models of creativity, courage, or caution. Their absence invites society to pause, reflect, and consider how influence persists even after life ends. The week has prompted diverse conversations about the meaning of legacy. For Princess Irene, attention is turning to the enduring impact of her philanthropic initiatives, her dedication to music and cultural exchange, and her quiet yet persistent advocacy for arts education. Her life exemplifies how influence is not measured only by public visibility, but by the thoughtful, consistent work that touches lives over decades. Geordie Glassner's candid engagement with her terminal illness is likewise inspiring, highlighting the power of authenticity and the courage it takes to publicly share one's most vulnerable experiences. Her podcast, Grief Street, continues to be a sanctuary for audiences navigating loss, illustrating how storytelling can create community and foster healing. In entertainment, T.K. Carter's passing has inspired both retrospection and celebration. Fans are revisiting his diverse body of work, reflecting on how humor, emotional depth, and relatability combine to make his performances memorable. Discussions about Carter's career underscore an important truth. Longevity in culture is not solely about constant visibility, but about leaving a lasting emotional imprint. His roles remain influential because they resonated with audiences in authentic, human ways. Meanwhile, Arlindo de Souza's death underscores the complex relationship between fame, body image, and health. His life story has become a catalyst for conversations about the responsibilities of both influencers and audiences. It highlights the unseen pressures behind viral personas and the potential consequences of extreme pursuits of attention or admiration. This dialogue extends beyond the realm of fitness and social media, inviting reflection on societal values, aspiration, and the delicate balance between ambition and well-being. Beyond these individual stories, the week illustrates how grief functions in a hyper-connected world. Social media, streaming platforms, and online archives allow mourning to become both communal and continuous. Fans share memories, highlight achievements, and create spaces where private grief can intersect with public remembrance. Through these interactions, memory is not static. It becomes an evolving dialogue, enabling influence to extend beyond the constraints of life itself. The week's losses also prompt personal reflection. Audiences are reminded that time is finite, that opportunities for meaningful engagement are precious, and that influence can be exercised in countless ways, from acts of service to creative output. In this context, each life lost serves as both a lesson and an inspiration, encouraging society to value connection, integrity, and thoughtful impact over superficial recognition or fleeting fame. As January 2026 progresses, the cultural, emotional, and historical effects of these deaths will continue to unfold. Retrospectives, tributes, and archival releases will keep audiences engaged with the work and legacy of the departed. Public conversations about health, creativity, and human connection will persist, enriched by the lessons embedded in each story. In this way, absence transforms into ongoing presence, reinforcing the enduring power of life lived with intention and courage. Ultimately, the week serves as a poignant reminder that legacy transcends mortality. Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza are no longer physically present, yet their influence continues to reverberate through culture, media, and collective memory. In honoring their lives, society participates in a living dialogue about impact, memory, and the ways in which human stories endure, bridging past, present, and future while affirming the profound resonance of a life well lived. As the days continue to unfold, the reverberations of this week's losses reveal themselves not only in public mourning but in the quieter, more enduring ways society processes grief and remembrance. The deaths of Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza illustrate a complex interplay between visibility, legacy, and human connection. While each life occupied different spheres, royalty, podcasting, acting, and fitness culture, the common thread lies in the lasting influence each individual imparted, demonstrating that impact is measured not merely in years or fame, but in resonance and relational depth. Audiences are responding in multifaceted ways. In homes, listeners and viewers are revisiting old episodes, interviews, and performances, finding comfort, inspiration, or reflection in familiar voices. Schools, universities, and cultural organizations are highlighting Princess Irene's contributions to arts and philanthropy, using her life as a case study in leadership, dedication, and the transformative power of cultural engagement. Mental health advocates and podcast listeners continue to draw lessons from Geordie Glassner's openness about terminal illness, using her story to encourage dialogue around grief, vulnerability, and the importance of community support. In the realm of entertainment, T.K. Carter's body of work has taken on renewed significance. Discussions about his roles emphasize how subtlety, humor, and authenticity can create a lasting emotional connection with audiences. His characters are revisited not only for nostalgia, but for the enduring humanity he brought to each performance, underscoring that artistic legacy is as much about empathy and relatability as it is about visibility. Similarly, Arlindo de Souza's passing has ignited conversations about the pressures of viral fame and the health risks associated with extreme body modification. His life story serves as both a cautionary tale and a touchpoint for broader discussions about ethics, influence, and responsibility in digital culture. This week also reflects how modern mourning has evolved. Social media, digital archives, and online communities have transformed grief into an interactive, ongoing experience. Tributes, discussions, and shared memories create a living narrative, allowing individuals to connect across geography and time. Memory is actively preserved and amplified, ensuring that influence does not vanish with death, but continues to shape thought, action, and culture. The impact of these losses also encourages introspection. Audiences are reminded of the fragility of life, the impermanence of public recognition, and the ways personal influence can ripple beyond immediate awareness. Each story, Princess Irene's lifetime of cultural service, Geordie Glassner's courageous vulnerability, T.K. Carter's humanizing performances, and Arlindo de Souza's cautionary fame, offers insights into the ways human beings can leave lasting marks on society. As January 2026 moves forward, these legacies will continue to unfold. Retrospectives, academic discussions, archival releases, and fan-driven tributes will preserve the work and memory of the departed, sustaining their presence in cultural consciousness. Personal reflection and collective remembrance will reinforce the lessons embedded in their lives, demonstrating that influence is ongoing and memory is a dynamic force that connects past, present, and future. Ultimately, the deaths of this week serve as a reminder that while life is finite, impact is not. Through their work, their courage, and the connections they forged, Princess Irene, Geordie Glassner, T.K. Carter, and Arlindo de Souza continue to shape the world. In honoring their stories, society engages in an active dialogue about legacy, responsibility, and remembrance, ensuring that absence is never complete and that influence persists across time, space, and generations.